We'll get underway. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, June 4th. Holland Squallen Quistoktamuk ta Squamish Ochmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have any concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting, which is Carrie Wells this evening. Council, we have an amended agenda before us that to add some late correspondence, which is 7B1 and 2 and 12.2. Could I have someone move the amended agenda? Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. We don't have any delegations, petitions, or proclamations this evening under item 3. Item 4 is consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is where if someone has a matter that's emergent in nature and requires council address before our next scheduled meeting, this would be your opportunity to do that. Okay, we've got a couple hands. I'll just go by the who's closest to the mic as a way to start. And if you could, I'll just run through the procedure. The procedure is going to be the same for both hands, or if there are additional hands. The first piece with unscheduled public attendance is you have 2 minutes to address council as to why the matter is emergent and should be heard this evening, not the piece itself. And if once we've heard why it's timely and emergent issue this evening, council will vote on whether to hear from you, and then the space for unscheduled public attendance is elsewhere on the agenda, where you would actually make the point or bring forward your concern. So this is about, the first bit is about the why it's important that council hear from you on your matter this evening. So with that caveat, we'll get started. So if you'd like to approach the podium, the mic will magically turn on for you, and you have 2 minutes to address council. And if you could start with introducing yourself for those that aren't acquainted with you yet.
Well, Colton Siam, Chief Dale Harry. I guess I'll give you my address, 37648 Chief Harry Drive. I guess what I wanted to speak to the item on the council agenda for the reconsideration of the decision to issue a temporary use permit. And I feel it's really important that I speak on that, because I remember I came in here last time and my Sea to Sky, Tracy was her name, and she got to speak way beforehand. So do I get to speak right now what I want to say?
The decision before council will be whether to hear from you later in the agenda. So you have some time on the clock. You could use it as you see fit, but that's the point you're trying to argue at this point.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got 2 minutes. So I just wanted to state that I spoke in vigorous support of this at the public hearing in April, and I want to raise my concern again. And I was disrespected, by myself, my mother, my daughter, my granddaughter, she was an elder from the Squamish Nation, 93 years old. And our views were dismissed while the views of those that were speaking in opposition were lauded and upheld. And this is very concerning to me, and the Squamish Council staff have made it clear that this was the best solution for the Squamish Nation and for this community. But I'm not going to belabor that point this evening. I want to look forward to a positive resolution and approval of the temporary use permit so that the solution is best for the nation, community, women, and the workforce, and realized without a several months delay. The delay is causing economic hardship, delaying business employment opportunities, and unnecessary delaying access to living accommodations that are intended. That has been approached by the point of silly, and I don't know why District Council would want to continue to delay the decision that is best for the community and the nation. And I hope the district will consider the strain that this decision is having on our Indigenous business in relationship with the Squamish Nation, and making a right decision to approve the TUP, temporary use permit, tonight. Work continues on the wood fiber LNG site. All that the district is doing is adding more logistical hurdles to how people get to work. These are good people, hardworking men, women that deserve a good meal, a comfortable place to stay in, a private room, and the end of a long shift. And same as all of us afford it. Let's not get in the way of economic reconciliation. That's all I want to say. So you
Perfect.
can cut me off again.
No, I just wanted to
Okay?
make sure that
You can cut me off again.
No, I'm not. I'm trying to stick to.
And by the way, I tried to get a hold of you, and you know
we've played tag a few times, and I'm sorry we haven't been able to.
I know we
connect
haven't
yet.
but-
So thank you. So council, the decision here is whether we'd like to hear from further from Chief Harry before or on later on the agenda. So if there's I know that there was yeah, but that's the question before. So we'd need a mover, a seconder, and a debate on the matter. Go ahead.
Clarifying question. Not is Chief Harry. Do you have more to say, or did you? Does
I think
unclear to me.
Well, this is where the question that we need to answer here is whether we hear later on the agenda. So it's more.
I'll move that we hear later on the agenda.
Okay. Are you seconding that, Councilor Penninger? Okay. Any discussion on this point? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. So we'll work to, and a little bit later, we'll adjust the agenda so that right now the unscheduled public attendance falls after that point, but that won't work for what we're doing here. So we will, that'll be another piece we need to adjust. So I saw another hand here. If you could approach the mic, and then I saw you there, and we'll go. I do want to, so same concept. We're looking for 2 minutes as to why the issue is new, emergent, and should be addressed this evening. And at some point, I just want to be clear that this isn't one of the things we'll be discussing later when if this is on reconsideration. I'm just seeing the sign just to is this isn't an additional public hearing. So this isn't a situation that. So we just need to be mindful that where we are in process, so that we can't have everybody do an unscheduled public attendance. But I welcome your submission here. So you do have 2 minutes to address council. Thank you.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Wilson. I'm a resident in Brackendale. My request here tonight is to be heard before the reconsideration of the temporary use permit. It is specific to the reconsideration and not to the public hearing that was held before or anything there. It's around the process, the way the reconsideration was introduced. And I want to make sure that myself and other people that I have talked to, their concerns are raised and perhaps addressed this evening before.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor French.
I'll move that we hear from Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second by Councilor Hamilton. I don't see any hands for discussion, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And sorry, I saw you. Was there another hand here? And then I'll go there. So if you could approach the microphone, and similar concept to before. You have 2 minutes to address council. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank you for having this opportunity to get up and say what I have to say. I have to be honest that I don't really know your process, your governing process. And my worry is granting a temporary use permit. I would like it to be referred back to staff, as there are some issues in regards to awarding a temporary use permit. I know that the reason why they're doing this is because it's not zoned in wood fiber for housing. So that's why they are doing the Flotel. Plus the issues, I mean, I'm Indigenous. There are issues about murdered and missing Indigenous women and the destructive industries that come into the towns. That is another issue. And I'm asking that you refer it back to staff so there can be a proper process that's going to ensure the safety of not just the community members in Squamish, but the House Sound also. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed a part. Did you state your name for the record, just to make sure that we have all of the,
I'm sorry. My non-Indian name is Roberta Williams. I was born and raised here in Squamish. I've been here for 65 years, and I live in Uquapsum. Government Road, if you don't know where that is.
no, thank you very much. Council? Councillor Pettingill moves, Councillor Hamilton seconds. Okay, all in favor? Motion carries. And I saw a hand here, and so you can approach the microphone, and then I think we're going to need to cap those speakers at this point. Go ahead.
All right. So, hi, thanks so much. I'm Miriam Adrengi. I'm in Brackendale. I wasn't at the TUP hearings, but one thing I was, now with this coming back and coming forward, one thing as speaking with people I've heard that wasn't spoken about were, while yes, there were many community impacts, things about drug trafficking and homicides. And the reason I actually wasn't at the TUP hearing was I was up north communicating with Indigenous leaders who have been impacted by LNG projects and pipelines, as well as community members who have been researching and working on these issues. And some of the things they spoke about was mentioning a town like Houston, which is about 3,000 people going from no homicides to the work camps coming in and there being 6 homicides. So given that the TUP is coming back, I think it's a really important social issue for our city to know about and to discuss when considering such projects coming in.
Okay, thank you. Council, Councillor Hamilton, I'll second that. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So we'll move on from our from unscheduled public attendance to we have no public hearings, and now we're on to the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda? No. If not, I would look to if someone would like to move the consent agenda as presented. Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So now we're on to bylaws, first and second reading, and I will pass it over to. I will buy them some time as they get set up. This is a District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw number 3031-2024 for McNamee Place. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I'll let you over to staff to introduce themselves and the topic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Philip Gibbons planner with the Community Planning Department. And this evening I'll be presenting a rezoning proposal for 1006 and 1018 McNamee Place. and this is Council's first time seeing this proposal. And under the new provincial legislation, the district is prohibited from holding a public hearing for this rezoning. It would be possible to give the bylaw 3 readings in one meeting. However, staff are recommending 2 readings at this stage as there are unresolved environmental, servicing and frontage considerations, which would need to be captured in a land development agreement. As there's no public hearing requirement, it would be possible for council to receive information and make changes prior to this bylaw being brought back for additional readings. The subject site consists of 2 separate parcels on McNamee Place and is located in the Dentville neighbourhood within the Wilson Crescent microplan area. 10006 McNamee Place is currently a vacant lot, and 1018 is developed with 9 3-bedroom rental townhouses. To the south and east are residential townhouse developments and an apartment development to the west, which is accessed from Buckley Avenue. To the southwest is the rail line and Wilson Slough to the north side of McNamee Place. Applicable district land use regulations are outlined on this slide, along with a map of the zoning. The OCP land use designation is residential neighbourhood, and the current zoning is multiple residential 2 and residential 4. And the site falls within development permit areas 1, 2, 3, and 11. 1 is for environmental protection, 2 for flood hazard, 3 regulates form and character, and 11 for wildfire protection. The site is also within a flood hazard area. The proposal is to rezone the subject properties to a new comprehensive development zone to facilitate development of a 5-story apartment complex, which would include 2 neighbourhood commercial units at the first level. And this development split into 2 buildings, which are joined by a shared parking structure. Building 1 would be for sale apartment units with 62 units, and building 2 would contain 15 affordable rental units. The applicant has committed to a no gas covenant being registered on title for the entire development, and to a tenant relocation plan, which will be discussed later in this presentation. The proposed development has a parking requirement of 138 spaces, and the application is proposing a reduction to 102 spaces. Staff support the reduction based on proximity to downtown, transit, bikeability, and walkability. The community amenity contribution, cash in lieu payment of $118,000 is proposed, as well as the provision of 15 affordable housing units. And on this slide, you can see a comparison between what the proposal and the current CAC policy. And this policy meets or exceeds these requirements. Conditions proposed for the land development agreement would include the number and tenure of affordable housing units to be secured through housing agreement, number of 3-bedroom units, the no gas covenant, number of adaptable units, requirement for occupancy to secure the rental building, required frontage and servicing upgrades, environmental compensation rehabilitation, bonding for tenant relocation, and secure access to the indoor amenity area for building 2, as the indoor amenity is located in building 1. The 15-unit affordable rental building is to be secured in the land development agreement. There will be a requirement for a housing agreement to be entered into, which would happen at the development permit stage. The housing agreement must be consistent with the district's perpetually affordable housing policy, and rents for the units will be set consistent with the policy at the time. A draft tenant relocation plan has been included as part of the report to council and outlines the proposed requirements, including compensation and administration, and an updated table from the plan showing the unit mix and sizes is shown on this slide. A question was received related to what constitutes special circumstances for additional tenant support and who determines who is eligible. Special circumstances could be a person with disability or someone's elderly, but is not limited to these items to allow for flexibility, and the decision for who is eligible would be made by the tenant coordinator as an independent third party. The proposed development aligns with OCP policy, aligns with the land use designation. It provides infill of unutilized land with compact high density and provides a diversity of apartment types and affordable rental units. The proposal also advances strategic plan objectives, providing diversity of housing form and tenure types and provision of employment spaces. And it also advances a number of policies within the Wilson Crescent microplan. For engagement, an information site was placed on site. The application was posted on the development showcase. To date, no requests for a public information meeting or comments from the public were received, and notice of the bylaw readings were mailed out to nearby resident and placed in the chief newspaper in accordance with legislation. If given first and second readings, next step will be to finalize frontage and habitat and compensation requirements, and this information will be brought back for review at third reading. No Ministry Transportation Infrastructure approval is required for this rezoning, and if subsequently given 3 readings, staff would work with the applicant to satisfy the conditions of adoption and schedule the bylaw for adoption once complete. Other permits, including development permit, servicing, and building permit, would still be required. And finally, the recommendation is that District of Squamish Amendment Bylaw for 10006 and 1018 McNamee Place be given first and second reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, who wants to start us off with questions? Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. One commercial loading zone space is proposed for this development, and the documentation from the proponent doesn't indicate how many are actually required. So my first question is, how many does our policy suggest are required? This is commercial loading zone spots.
Through the chair, just one loading spot.
Okay, and one site plan indicates the loading zone is located in a children's play area, which I'm going to guess is an error. A second site plan has it next to the vehicle access off of McNamee, and the rendering, which we've seen, seems to indicate that it's in a large grassy area. So what's correct?
The most recent drawings are the ones that show it located within the children's play area. It had been relocated due to providing a turnaround for a fire truck. It was previously adjacent to the driveway. And we've made this note with the applicant, and these details will need to be obviously worked out subsequently, and that would happen as we move through and towards development permit stage. As at the rezoning stage, we're kind of conceptually looking that the items can fit within the parcel.
Okay. And I think you might have addressed this in the presentation, but I'll double check on it. Will residents of Building 2 have access to the amenity space in Building 1?
Through the chair, yes, we'll put a requirement in the land development agreement that access to the indoor amenity space must be granted.
Can I venture one more, Mayor? From the proponent's proposal document, it indicates the slough across the street is intended to become a park. I was a bit surprised by this. What can staff tell us about that?
Through the chair, the proposal document was submitted as part of the original application package and has been included to provide some of the additional context. From staff's perspective, the slough will not become a park and it will remain as a riparian, and there'll be potential for habitat restoration and compensation.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Hamilton, then Pettingill and Anderson.
Yeah, thanks very much. Parking. So in the staff report, it says there's 138 spaces required through our bylaws, and 102 provided in the proposal. Is there a cash in lieu for parking contribution, or none?
Through the chair, no cash in lieu proposed for parking. That policy only applies within the downtown area.
Ah, thank you. Learning. So when a proposal comes forward that doesn't meet our required parking, we don't have any cash in lieu procedure for outside the downtown area. Do I understand that correctly?
Through the chair, the cash in lieu is set out specifically within the zoning bylaw as an option, so it wouldn't be specifically a reduction in a variance in the parking requirement, whereas this would be varying the number of required spaces. Makes sense.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. The number of required spaces, that comes from the number of units. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so this proposal for a reduction in the number of parking spaces, the proponent is just requesting a reduction in our requirements. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the distribution of those spaces, are they allocated yet? Presuming let's call them missing spaces, are coming from the affordable units? Is that correct?
Requirements have not specifically been set out at this time.
Thank you. Just to add on to that, there is no requirement for parking for affordable housing units as per the recent bylaw update that was adopted 2 weeks ago.
The R1 zoning?
That is correct.
That applies to... Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, and maybe I misunderstood, but I thought there was a zoning which limited to a parcel to rental, but these are RM2 and R4 currently. So what is the tool that is requiring these to be rental right now? Or actually, I guess what's more important is what could the developer build without a rezoning, given the existing zoning? What in the general sense of what sort of options exist today without a rezoning there?
Through the chair, so the RM2 provides, it has site-specific requirements for rental tenure, and so for the 1000, sorry, the one that currently has the 9 rental townhouses has a site-specific rental tenure requirement within the RM2 zone. The other site, which is zoned R4, which essentially has identical requirements to the RM2 zone, could be constructed to a similar level with no rental tenure. So that would be required to maintain at least those 9 rental townhouses, and then anything in addition with, if there was any floor area ratio left over, they could be constructed as regular townhouses.
Okay, thank you. And do we have an understanding of what the makeup is of the current tenants? And I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around here is we're proposing a greater number of below market rentals, but much smaller. And so my question or concern is that, is this a bunch of families which, yeah, we have a net increase in the number of rentals, but in terms of functional rentals for the people that would be displaced, they are not, they're losing a place to live, or do we have an understanding that the new sizes could well work?
Through the chair, we do not have that information about the current tenants.
Okay, and then as I read our current policy, it's built on based on floor area for the rental, below market rental amount. Is there a reason why we landed on more smaller units as opposed to maintaining the same number of units, roughly the same size?
Through the chair, no, there is no specific reasoning for that.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Mr. Gibbons, my first question arises from the section in the staff report on parking. I'll just read out here. Staff suggests the proposed parking reduction is supportable based on, and there's a list of alternative modes and other facilities available. But it concludes with, and current trends in parking demand. Is there documentation of this trend and documentation for similar community circumstances as we have in Squamish and for this housing type? Are you basing that statement of trends on analysis that's done elsewhere that's applicable to here? Thank you.
Through the mayor, understanding best practices and research done, I believe, in 2018, 2019 in Victoria, with proximity to services and sort of the downtown, there is a lower use of vehicle parking, which is generally where we base our recommendations on when they are in a walkable neighborhood. But on a site-specific analysis, that has not been done.
Thank you. My next question concerns the environmental compensation and rehabilitation component. In the next implementation steps, I'll read that: finalize the bioinventory to determine the required compensation and rehabilitation in relation to DPA 1. Now, this waterway that's already been referenced, proposed for a park, it is the former east branch of the Squamish River, and together with the Carson Place Slough, the Wilson Crescent Slough has been the subject of restoration conversations for a long, long time. It was filled in, the connection with the river was filled in 1944 by the railway, and we finally had that rehabilitated in 2007. However, it's not working. The slough needs maintenance. The issues are freshwater flow, hydraulic gradient, and tidal flushing, also related to hydraulic gradient. There hasn't been pink salmon in that, spawning in there for about 9 years. So my question is, when you refer to a bioinventory, can or would this take into account the, if you like, holistic needs of the waterway, and in particular the hydraulic conditions? We've got a lot of block culverts. I visited it tonight. Buckley Avenue culvert is a mess as we speak here. So can we address components of that waterway outside the immediately adjacent portion next to the development? What can we include or address in that bioinventory and environmental compensation proposal? Thank you.
Through the mayor, I can speak to that. Jonas Volničkis, Senior Director of Community Development. Generally, bio inventories kind of look at existing conditions. And again, I'm not a biologist, but speaking on behalf of the environmental department in the general sense. So sometimes when development is encroaching, we require compensation, and that compensation can take form in improvement of habitat. Because this is a rezoning, we could also take a look at through the bio inventory process whether some of the community amenity contributions can be allocated to improving the conditions beyond what this development would be responsible for in the normal course of things.
Thank you, Mr. Volničkis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, and then I'll go to Councillor Greenlaw. There was an if there. How would staff recommend that we, if that was the desire of council, like how would we provide that direction inside the proposal as it stands?
So it is my understanding that staff are currently looking at the bio inventory, and that's going to be completed prior to adoption. I'm just looking at Ms. Fletcher to confirm.
That was a statement and a question. We'll just.
I will be completed prior to third reading.
Excellent. So at that point, we'll know what the conditions are in the slough and whether there could be improvements or not.
Okay, thank you. So a matter for future self. Thank you for that clarity. I'll go to Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Through the chair, I have a series of questions regarding the current residents, so I'm not sure if staff can answer, but I was wondering if staff could speak to how many people are currently living in these townhouses and if there's a plan for facilitating their relocation.
Through the chair, we don't have specific details on who lives in the townhouses. The applicant has proposed a tenant relocation plan in consultation with staff, which was attached to the council report, which includes compensation and assistance and first right of refusal for the affordable housing if they meet the criteria.
I'm just wondering, like with the accessibility of rental units in our community, there's a high likelihood that these current residents will just be displaced from our community is my fear around this, right? And I see that the studios, of which there are about 40, there would be 47 in total, would be 36.4 meters squared or less than 400 square feet. Would there be any additional storage units for these residents? Is that at all in the plans?
Storage requirements would just be as per zoning bylaw requirements. Additional storage is required for things like bicycle parking, but no other specific storage requirements.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Councillor Pettingill. I had a question around when does the traffic on Wilson, that sort of north arm of Wilson Crescent, is two-way, if I remember correct, if I have it right. So then I saw that there was some relatively recent improvements to the intersection, or trying to make it better. Like, I didn't see any mention of improvements or this development sort of tipping something over the scale for traffic impact in that area. And it just feels like an area that has relatively low traffic, and this would represent quite an increase, which is I understand why that's could be a good thing, but the traffic at that intersection and I suppose that interesting intersection on the corner of Wilson and Wilson there as well. So how is that to be considered? Is that something that's already been considered, or is that something for a future point, or is it not a concern from staff's perspective?
Through the chair, I was wondering if we might have Devon Kianaga on the line.
Thank you for joining us.
Hey everyone, Devin Keenaga, Manager of Development Engineering. Through the chair, so traffic impact assessment is underway. We've had the first draft for that intersection, so we are reviewing. Initial review has shown or the initial results are showing that from a purely traffic flow perspective, there aren't really concerns from a traffic volume perspective to that intersection. We've also indicated that we need to look at the safety aspect of it, and they have provided some information on that. We haven't digested all that yet. So that's underway and will be sorted, and any mitigation measures required at that intersection would be presented and proposed prior to third reading. The greater concern, I think, for that area, at least on our radar, is really the aspect of pedestrian access to that zone. There's no sidewalks or anything, and a lot of people do walk down Wilson Crescent. At this point, we are recommending upgrades to McNamee Place, specifically up to that corner of Wilson and Wilson. So upgrades on their frontage would include a sidewalk extending beyond their frontage to Wilson and Wilson. We have not at this point recommended upgrades further, and we kind of anticipate future development or future capital projects to ultimately fund those. But that's where we're sitting at the moment with this development.
Okay, thank you. So from a pedestrian or cycling perspective, there's safe access to Wilson, and then the idea would be that they go through use the south arm, which has more protections for people using that mode of transportation. Is that sort of the thought process?
The south end of Wilson, no, not necessarily. We anticipate that people will use both the north and south end. Realistically, it's probably people would use the north leg, so the two-way stretch of Wilson Crescent. Given the volumes, we have not identified this leg of Wilson Crescent for bike lanes, but more of a kind of neighborhood slowed down, general traffic calmed area. I hesitate to use too many buzzwords there, but the anticipation is really a sidewalk would be adequate for this stretch of Wilson Crescent.
Okay, so we'll dig into that further when we have the traffic impact assessment and at third reading. Okay, so I had Councillor Pettingill next, I believe.
Yeah, thanks. I saw there was up to 3 months of a rental subsidy provided for people displaced. I didn't see, and can you clarify, is there anything about the length of the for tenants that wish to exercise their access to the new suites? Any guarantee on how long before they are available again, or what happens if it takes longer to make them available, or it's just sort of it's the 3 months and then we hope for the best?
Through the chair, there are no conditions related to the length of time proposed.
Okay, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. I have one additional question. So in the tenant relocation plan, under the rental statistics, there's information in table B. And one of the columns is titled size range measured by square feet. And then the numbers below are not a range. And those numbers make no sense to me. I wonder if staff could provide any clarification of what those numbers mean.
Sorry, Councillor French, could you just orient us on which table? And I know staff has an answer, just so we're all looking at the same piece.
Yes. It is the attachment number 3 that is titled Tenant Relocation Plan. That plan is a 5-page document, and the table that I'm focused on starts at the bottom of page 2 rather, and carries on into page 3.
Okay, thank you for that. Go ahead.
Through the chair, There's some errors in that table. I provided an updated table on my affordable housing slide within the presentation, but essentially, might just try and share my screen. So we have the updated information.
Great. Yes, this makes way more sense. Thank you.
Okay, that addresses your concerns for now. Okay, any other questions? We have a recommendation before us. Councillor Pettingill?
I was going to try to move the recommendation, but just with first reading. And if it's seconded, I will speak to it.
Seconded by Councillor French. Go ahead.
Yeah, in general, I think, I mean, there's some compromise here, but I think all things considered, it makes sense. My hesitation, the reason for only going to first reading, so I want to signal sort of general comfort, but it is not clear to me that the tenant relocation plan actually is able to keep any of the existing tenants in a unit. I understand there will be some disruption and so on, but, and I'm not sure how we deal with it, but I would like to see some comfort that for the folks that want to be in the new units, there's an actual path to do so. We know, like, if this takes 2 years to construct, the 3 months of rental help in the interim, they're going to be out of community. If the unit sizes, you know, going from 9 to 15 is great if none of the 9 want the units or don't need the space they have. But if this plan ends up displacing all 9, like, it's then all we're increasing our count, but we're not actually helping the people that are in the vulnerable situation. So I guess I'm looking at second reading to have some understanding or some comfort that we're actually making a meaningful impact to the degree we can on anyone in a tough situation that's living there now. I think we do have to recognize, my understanding, these are older units, and there does need to be a way to redevelop and you know, keep units relatively up to date. But I think we have to really prioritize as much as we can the impacts and displacement. And so that's the piece where I'd like a little more understanding that, again, the folks that are there are somewhat protected.
Okay, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. I share many of Councillor Pettingill's concerns, and at a higher level, the amount of attention to detail with this project doesn't meet our usual high standards. For example, Squamish doesn't have a mining museum. That's in Britannia Beach. Garibaldi is spelled wrong in the proponent package, and the presentation package has McNamee spelled incorrectly. Like, these are just red flags for me that make me a little bit nervous about this project. If they can't get these things correct, how are they going to get important things like the tenant relocation plan nailed? So I'm supporting first reading because I'd like to see the proponents come back to us with a sharper plan.
Thank you. Other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
I won't be supporting the first reading. I have concerns with the parking being insufficient. I'm also concerned that the units are far too small to accommodate comfortable living for the average individual or family. Studios are starting at 391 square feet. Sorry, I'm a bad scientist. I use imperial for spaces, but to 3-bedroom units at 1,000 square feet without a storage unit is just not, it's not very livable in Squamish. And I'm deeply concerned about the displacement of the current residents. I think it highly likely that these existing tenants will be permanently displaced from our community and will not be able to afford the inevitable rental cost escalation, as a townhouse is currently renting for, as far as I know, around $3,500 plus per month. And that's a hefty escalation from the $2,500 estimated that they're currently paying. Yeah, I'm concerned that this will be a continuation of the displacement of people from Squamish through effectively gentrification. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Anderson.
Just for clarity, Chair, the motion is, I wonder if you may be able to repeat the present motion for.
The motion was first reading.
Thank you. I will comment then if I may. I'll support the motion to allow first reading at this time. A few comments, share the concerns that have already been raised, but this is not Dentville. And I think that some of the neighbors in Dentville might notice this, and it is Dentville, of course, is not included in the Wilson Crescent microplan. It's more appropriately described as Wilson Crescent neighborhood. With respect to colors, in the spirit of our discussion recently on proposed changes to the DPA 3 guidelines, I would hope that we can encourage the proponent to consider some perhaps accents, but some brighter colors. We have a lot of gray, black, and brown buildings in Squamish, and I hope that this might be able to be encouraged. Concerning parking, I think we ongoing need to be mindful of what documentation and analysis there is, not only here or not only elsewhere, but here on parking demand in rental units. I think this is going to be an ongoing issue to watch and to learn about. On the matter of the environmental compensation and rehabilitation, I would be concerned about the proposal for park status. I think that orientation is toward protection. We don't need protection. We need restoration, and we need a holistic plan for restoration beyond the adjacency of the property. There are also along this waterway 4 known Squamish Nation Village sites. And there are also, at least at this time, under construction, 700 housing units, if we take it right up to the Upper Blind Channel, and there's going to be more. So this is a neighborhood amenity as well as an ecological feature. Finally, I think we should consider a new name for this channel. I think it's a little bit of collective laziness that we're calling it the Wilson Slough. Mr. Wilson was a railway superintendent who had nothing to do with it except to maybe dam the river at one point in 1944. Perhaps we should take into account these 4 known Squamish Nation Village sites and give that some consideration. But it is, I suggest, a collective laziness to be calling it the Wilson Slough. And we've been doing that for a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. And I'll be speaking in support of first reading. Personally, I'm additionally comfortable with second reading at this point, but I'm happy to move along with first reading. Thank you very much for helping me understand Section 449E of our zoning bylaw. I now see where that affordable housing does not require off-street parking spaces, period. I had misunderstood that piece of our zoning bylaw to be affordable housing units, like apartments that were 100% affordable. So thank you for clarifying that for me. So I'm happy to support.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that I was clear for staff. I'm not sure what, I'm not saying I'm necessarily dissatisfied with this relocation plan. It's just not clear to me in practical terms whether this makes no difference or a significant difference. And so I'm looking for some way to understand, does this, what percentage of the people that would like to stay in a redevelopment could do so, and that isn't clear to me. And so I'm not necessarily requesting changes, but if changes are warranted, then they should be there. But it may be just sufficient to understand actually this is quite a workable plan for the majority of the folks, and I just don't have that understanding right now.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure that we're clear that we're considering providing first reading here, which I'm speaking in support of. We've heard comments around the table, so after we vote on this, I'm going to go to staff to see if they have appropriate guidance for what those outstanding pieces are, because that hasn't been captured in the motion, but in the comments. So I'll speak in support of first reading. I think that in general, I'm supportive of this approach in this area. The tenant relocation plan, I think, is really interesting. And when we brought in the rental zoning that has sort of required this, this is maybe something that we don't have a lot of properties that have this rental zoning that would bring this that would trigger the need for a tenant relocation plan. And this is the first one that I recall dealing with, and it just I don't know that I'd like some additional context as to like what a good tenant relocation plan looks like versus where this is rather ad hoc and understandably so, it lacking our specific policy of what a tenant relocation plan should include. So I'd like to understand that a little bit more. I don't know that anything needs to move. It's more the context of it for me. I'm not all the way there that I think this goes far enough. And I'm supportive on the understand the parking piece, and I know storage is similar to parking in so much as square footage is square footage, and that could be housing. But I really think the livability of anything that we're approving here is really important. So I would like to understand to see if there's more opportunities for storage in association with these units, particularly the smallest of them. So I'd like to see a little bit more there. And to me, it's not enough. So I'd like to see an increase in that. But what is that trade-off? And I don't know what is acceptable there for myself, but I think that there's this is an area where this project could see an improvement. I do think also that first reading versus second reading at this point, I don't know how much of I know there's additional work underway. So when this comes back for second reading, maybe we can do second and third together if appropriate at that point in time. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor and opposed? Councillor Greenlaw opposes. Thank you. So I started my comments with, do you have something that you can take back to work on at this point, or would you like us to make a more formal motion that captures the specifics of it? I'm just I want to make sure that we're giving the appropriate direction.
I think we're good with the comments today.
Okay, thank you very much. So council, we have some adoptions to move through. And for those joining us, these are generally things that have been waiting for T's to be crossed and I's to be dotted. So there's no presentation. We just move through them. So, and I will need some help from my council colleagues on this one. Are you getting ready to move the first one, Councillor French? Councillor French moves the District of Squamish Water Meter Capital Works Loan Authorization Bylaw, and it's seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have the District of Squamish Landfill Gas Capture and Flare Capital Works Loan Authorization Bylaw, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have the District of Squamish Fire Fleet Replacement Pumper Truck Loan Authorization Bylaw, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French, who I think just has his hand up the whole time. And all in favor? Any opposed? That wasn't an opposed, was it, Councillor Anderson? No. Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have District of Squamish Pioneer Way Extension R4 Capital Works Loan Authorization Bylaw, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Couple more of these to go. District of Squamish Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw, number 3084, moved by Councillor Pettingill, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have the District of Squamish Growing Communities Grant or Growing Communities Fund Grant Reserve Bylaw, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. District of Squamish Tree Management Bylaw number 2640/2018. This is an amendment bylaw for some minor amendments. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have District of Squamish Business License Bylaw number 2455, Amendment Bylaw. This is regarding short-term rental accommodation definition. I'll move that. Second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we've got District of Squamish Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw. This is an amendment bylaw for, again, regarding short-term rental fine increase. I'll move that, and it's seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So next we're on to development permit number 614 for 1940 Centennial Way. We'll pass it over to staff to introduce themselves and the topic.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Abraham, Planning Consultant, presenting on behalf of the Community Development Department. And I'm here tonight to present a development permit application for Centennial Way Phase 3. The subject property was previously used as a campground and mini golf site that underwent a rezoning process in 2018. The District of Squamish adopted zoning amendment bylaw number 2529 and approved a land development agreement for Centennial Way on July 20th, 2021. A development permit for Phase 1 was issued in September 2022. The Phase 2 development permit was issued in October 2023, and the Phase 3 development permit application is now brought forward for council consideration. The subject property is a hooked parcel that goes across Centennial Way. DP 614 is specifically for the third of the three-phase development located at 1940 Centennial Way at the south side of Centennial. Phase 3 is noted on this slide as Site 2 and is highlighted by the dashed red line shown here. And Phase 3 is accessed off of Centennial Way via the Phase 1 Strata Road. It is about 4.9 acres in size. The Phase 3 proposal consists of 19 buildings with 75 three-story townhouse units. Townhouse units range in size from 1,700 square feet to 2,567 square feet. The unit mix is shown on the slide here with 39 two-bedroom and den units, 33 three-bedrooms, and 3 four-bedroom units, which also include a lock-off suite, for a total of 75 townhouse units. The development permit application was reviewed against DP Area 3 Form and Character Guidelines. A separate site-wide delegated development permit addressing environmental protection under DP Area 1 was issued in February 2023. The site is in a flood hazard area. A flood hazard assessment was received and a covenant registered on title. In addition, the site is in a wildfire hazard area and a wildfire hazard covenant was registered on title as part of the rezoning process. The Phase 3 site has 3 pedestrian access points and 2 vehicle accesses off of Centennial Way via the Phase 1 Strata Road. All vehicle parking is contained within garages or surface parking. 153 vehicle spaces are provided for residents and 19 spaces for visitors. 150 Class A bicycle parking spaces are provided on site and contained within garages. 12 Class B bicycle parking spaces are provided on site. 6 Class B spaces are located in the common open gathering area near the access road to the site. And then 2 Class B spaces are located at the entrance to each of the 3 lock-off suites. Vehicle and bicycle parking meet bylaw requirements. The Phase 3 site design provides pedestrian permeability between buildings and connectivity to Loggers Lane. Also connects to Centennial Way and the public dike trail across the road. All common open spaces and pedestrian connections are secured through public access statutory right-of-way. The development features a shared central open space between the buildings, activated with several seating and open lawn areas, a children's play area, covered picnic tables, open lawn area, and a plaza seating area near the entrance to the development. Private patios or balconies are provided at each unit. Landscape plants include the outdoor amenity features and a comprehensive planting plan, including coniferous and deciduous trees and a variety of shrub and ground cover species. Staff received a question from Council prior to this presentation whether the proposed western red and yellow cedar tree species meet wildfire hazard requirements. In response to this question, yes, these trees will be located a minimum of 10 meters from any building as per the Wildfire Hazard Covenant registered on title. As per the Land Development Agreement, the following commitments will be delivered as part of Phase 3. One townhouse unit is to be constructed as an affordable rental and transferred to an affordable housing provider. The unit will be secured by a housing agreement to be completed prior to any occupancy permits being issued to ensure affordability in perpetuity. The affordable unit is identified as unit number 61 in Building 14 and faces the central open space. It is a 2-bedroom and den unit, 1,778 square feet in size, and includes a 2-car garage. In addition, 3 cash in lieu payments in the amounts listed on the slide here and in the report will be paid prior to issuance of the development permit. In terms of form and character, exterior wall finishing includes corrugated metal panel and fiber cement lap siding in different color variations of deep gray, black, oak brown, twilight blue, and bone white. Roof finishing includes asphalt gray roof shingles, and the proposal meets the requirements for the DP Area 3 guidelines for form and character. To inform the community, per district policy, the project was posted to the district's development showcase and development sign posted on site. No public comments have been received, and a public information meeting was not held. Staff recommend the approval of DP 000614, subject to the conditions noted here on the slide. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions on this one? Go ahead, Councilor Pettingill.
Yeah, just reading the advisory design panel minutes, I saw some concerns raised around accessibility and also that some of the areas was too car focused. When I looked at our, I guess, table of concordance, if that's what we want to call it, with the DPA guidelines, it didn't jump out that we thought there was any issues there. So did the developer resolve something, or those particular comments from the ADP aren't covered by our guidelines? I'm just sort of wondering if there's a disconnect or there was some things that were changed.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the ADP comments, there were comments received regarding accessibility, which did result in the landscape design being modified. It included a picnic table extension and seating zones for wheelchair users. It also included some walkway revisions in terms of having curb cuts to allow sidewalks to better transition onto roadways or onto trails. In regards to the traffic calming, there were comments from ADP that it felt like it was not very pedestrian friendly in terms of the strata roads. A result of that, the design was updated to include crosswalks between sidewalk connections, as well as speed bumps throughout in order to slow traffic.
Thank you. Mike, I have a question around where is it? At least 10% of residential units should accommodate accessibility challenges, such as mobility, sensory, and cognitive disabilities. It says that the overall development meets the guideline and adaptable units are provided in phase 1. And I just wanted to double check. I read that as when this development is taken in, looked at in its entirety of all 3 phases, it meets that percentage, but this particular phase on its own doesn't. Is that where we are with that?
Yes. So in specifically about that guideline, so the overall development meets guidelines. Yes. It's because of the stairs are different levels in a townhouse unit. It wouldn't meet the accessibility standards in terms of a wheelchair user, but it could certainly have aging in place features or other adaptable features. There are accessible units in the phase 1 apartment building as well as in the phase 2 condo building.
Okay, thank you. So we're not making a compromise in the total number. It's just where they're located on the overall site.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Council, any additional questions? Councillor French?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, staff, for addressing my question about the cedars in the landscape plan. I appreciate that. The signage plan shows the use of the old school wheelchair logo for accessible parking. I'm wondering if staff could pass on to the proponent that we prefer the active wheelchair logo.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We have a staff recommendation before us. If there's no further questions, Councillor Hamilton, are you moving that?
Yeah, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor French seconds. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. It looks like this development is well organized, well thought through. It's one townhouse development, one more townhouse development of which we see a lot of here in Squamish, and I hope that it's going to provide a nice neighborhood for folks to live in, very close to our recreation facilities.
Thank you. Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. A note today, as I was coming here, a construction crane has been installed on this site. So they're clearly making progress. And I want to point out in my support for the motion, as we see from the advisory design panel concerns and the recommendations from the ADP, this is a proponent that is open to potential changes to the plan and has taken the recommendations to heart and made some adjustments based on the feedback.
Thank you. Any other comments? Speaking in support of the motion, I think when we're considering development permit, really it's all about whether it meets the guidelines or it doesn't. And I think this phase meets the vast majority of the guidelines, and when considered in the overall, which is totally appropriate, it meets all the requirements. So I see no reason to not issue this development permit. And thank you for all your work on this. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Greenlaw opposes. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so next up we have a bit of correspondence that has been added. This was the late piece where we added some correspondence that was received after the original agenda was published, and I've got some draft replies included as well. So council, you have this printed out, and for those attempting to follow along at home, the electronic agenda was updated this afternoon to reflect these as well. And in short, without reading out all the pieces here, we had a letter from the chamber with some concerns around questions of clarity, and so on around wood fiber LNG procurement policy and how that relates to EA certificate. Looking for clarity from us. We also had, since that letter was written, we received a letter from WLNG sort of in form of reply. And then I've got 2 proposed replies as well. And I think in the quest for clarity, this aims to achieve that. So if there's any questions about, I don't know that I can answer much as to the content of any of the letters except for my proposed reply. So I'll be looking for just endorsement of my response at this point. So if there's any questions, I'd entertain them, and if not, then I would move the recommendation. Not sure if everyone had time with this. Do you want to recess to consume these, or where is everybody at here? I want to make sure everyone has time. I've spent some time on this matter already. So, Councillor Hamilton,
could we just have a 5-minute recess?
Yeah. Why don't we?
Your letter that I need to read.
Yeah. So let's before we do. Yeah. So before we do that, what I'd like to do is just for everyone's clarity is I'd like to move we suspend the order of the agenda so that item 18, which is unscheduled public attendance, will come in following preceding item 15, which is the reconsideration. Just so I'll move that. Are you seconding that? Thank you. I think it's obvious why this is a appropriate course of action. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. And with that in mind, we're going to let's take 10 minutes. You have 5 minutes to read, but we've been sitting. So give us a chance to get a coffee, a chocolate, whatever, bio break, and then we'll reconvene at 7:30 by that clock. Okay. Thank you. We are now in recess and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay. Thank you. I'll call this meeting back to order. Thank you, everybody. We are now on a continuation of item 12.2, which is the correspondence from Wood Fiber LNG, from the chamber, and the mayor's proposed reply. So now that everyone's had time with it, are there any questions or suggested edits for this matter? Or if not, I would move the recommendation that the replies are sent as they're here in draft. Are you making the?
Yeah, I'll move.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Anderson, are you seconding that? Yep. Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this matter? I'll go with to the mover and the seconder, and then we'll go down the line. So, Councilor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. I think it's important that we both listen to the folks at the Chamber of Commerce and their concerns. It's important that we listen to WLNG's response to those concerns, and it's important that we act as a facilitator to ensure that these things, that expectations are being met and communicated clearly. So I hope that we can act in that role moving forward with both Wood Fiber and Fortis.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. The last paragraph in the Chamber of Commerce letter, that the district consider publicly issuing a clarification to prevent the ongoing possible misinterpretation of these directives. I won't cite the directives. I actually was confused myself, and I noted other people were in the community that read our submissions to the EAO, certain language there. So I appreciate that we are actually soliciting this clarity, undertaking it ourselves with the gesture of the two letters, Mayor Herford. So I think that this should resolve this issue of clarity. I also note that there was a job fair I don't see mentioned in Ms. Kennedy's letter that was held last January at Totem Hall. And back in 2016, there were 2 events that were the largest jobs and services procurement fairs ever held in this region. Filled up the Sea to Sky Hotel twice, but then the project went on hold. So we're at the beginning of a 3-4 year construction project, so we should recognize that. We're just starting out, but of course it is, I do see some clear intent on the part of the project proponents reflected in Ms. Kennedy's letter of June 3rd, but it's our job to remind and advise, and we should be doing so ongoing, and I feel we're doing this appropriately with your letters, Mayor Herford.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I appreciate the letters. I think it's important. I just want to flag one thing that jumped out at me reading these. I think I see if Wood Fiber effectively claiming they've done all kinds of engagement, but I know this body has many times written letters and so on about concern about the lack of engagement. And I would observe that, in theory, it's possible there's just some misunderstanding here, but when there's sufficient engagement, you tend not to have this kind of engagement. So I would suggest there maybe needs to, once again, be some consideration of whether or not engagement is adequate. It seems probably not. And I think, it shouldn't be news to anyone in this room who's been following us for the last few years. So, maybe this time the letter will get through and we'll see some change. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Yeah, thank you for my colleagues' support on this. I think you'll notice that the one of the points I wanted to make here was that the letter from the chamber speaks to issues that I think are pertinent across the project, and that's why, although the sort of the thrust of it was WLNG, that there's a reply also to Fortis as we continue our quest to have these proponents work together and sort of help our community understand not just the potential impacts, but the opportunities that are represented. So this is true in so many levels, and this body's written many a letter and made this point many a time, and I'll take this opportunity to make that point again. And I look forward to not receiving or having some action taken that leads to us not receiving further correspondence on this matter. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have any correspondence referred from the consent agenda under 13. We don't have any minutes referred from the consent agenda. So this brings us to unscheduled public attendance, where we had 4 speakers. I've made some notes here, but we'll go in the order that they presented originally. And you will have 2 minutes to address council, and we'll start with Chief Dale Harry. You're first up, and again, 2 minutes to address council, and then we'll move on to Mr. Wilson from there.
Yeah, OCM and CIA, Pakolton CM Koshamitsna. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm extremely pleased that, you know, I just wanted to talk about that reconsideration of the temporary use permit. Now, one of the things I looked at this correspondence on this thing with the Chamber of Commerce. Out of those 600 businesses, they only have one First Nation business on there. Only one. So all the stuff that they're dealing with wood fiber is through the Chikai Development Corporation. You know, when we're doing the employment, training, business opportunities, you know, and we're working on our own. You know, I had a meeting with Ann McKenzie, and I mentioned that to her. And I will help her get some of our First Nation members on that chamber, but I got to tell you what is that there's only one from the Squamish Nation business on that out of the 600. Also, I wanted to reflect on the Gender Safety Committee. I just wanted to share, you know, my mother is 93 years old. You met my mother, Lauren. She was on that committee. You know, the thing is that she always said to me, she says, you know, son, she says, I have my pros and cons on that whole project, but we got to make sure that they do it right. And part of that is getting that Gender Safety Committee. And I've seen some of the things with Deanna Lewis, former counselor, advocate for the, she sits on that committee. And she's also the one that trained over 1,000 workers in wood fiber. And we're dealing with Solaris Murphy and Fortis. So there's a lot of bit of training in there. So one of the things I just wanted to share that they listened and they heard what was being said by the nation. You know, some of the stuff that we did, I know we got planners. I really appreciate the planners. They do hard work. They do the hard work. You pay them to make sure that they bring you the right information. And you got to trust that information. I always used to sit at the table like you guys. I used to be a Philadelphia lawyer, professional engineer. You know, I used to go up and think that. But you guys hire some really good people in there. And I know that because we have that with our nation. We separated our business from politics. We have Chikai Development Corporation. We got people working for us to make sure that we create opportunities for all our community, our First Nation community, and environment first and foremost, because we have our own environmental team. We have 29 conditions. And you know what? I always says, you know, slow yeses are better than hard no's. Industry better make those conditions or the nation could stop it. But I just wanted to make sure that you share what, you know, I just wanted to make sure that you listen and hear what I say. Because I was involved in the beginning. I went through 5 mayors when I was in council. You guys come and go. We're always here forever. You know, and we won't do anything at the expense of the community or the community of our nation. So I just wanted to share that. I think my 2 minutes is up. Let's see them.
Thank you very much for your submission. Next, I had Mr. Wilson.
believe last time it was 5 minutes. We're down to 2 minutes now.
So there's different
Criteria?
times for different pieces. So what I will, so this piece is 2 minutes and 2 minutes. And we did just, I've been quite generous with where that sits and with past speakers. So,
I'm
but
paced
let's
at
not
about-
push the limits of that here if we could. So you have 2 minutes to address council,
I'm
please.
paced at 3.5 minutes. Sorry, if I knew the 2 minutes, I would have changed it. So I'll begin. Good evening. My name is David Wilson. I'm a resident of Brackendale here in Squamish. The mayor, council members, and the attending public, thank you for listening to me this evening on the matter of the reconsideration of wood fiber LNG's temporary use permit. I'm here to air my concerns about what is about to take place, not with the permit itself, but with the process. Council's decision to deny the TUP on April 30th followed a public hearing process. However, after that time, before the regular business meeting on May 21st, the proponent introduced new information that resulted in a council member to bring forward a reconsideration motion. For those that are not familiar with the bylaws, section 17.3 reads, no further submissions from the public, including any applicant concerned with the bylaw, may be received by council between the close of the hearing and the third reading, adoption, defeat, abandonment of a bylaw for which the public hearing was held unless another public hearing is held. The information brought forward by the applicant is introducing new information retroactively post-public hearing and before the decision on the TUP motion is considered. The introduction of this information has the same effect as if the application provided information post-public hearing and before the original council meeting that considered the TUP on April 30th. Therefore, as I read the bylaw, new information provided by the applicant cannot be used in the reconsideration of this bylaw. Now, bylaw section 12.9 addresses which council member, when a council member may elect to have a bylaw reconsidered, and it states, in the event that there is a significant change in circumstances or legislation, a matter may be reintroduced by any council member by motion, et cetera, et cetera. There has been no legislation that I'm aware of to cause a reconsideration, then there must be a significant change in circumstances. As I've stated before, new information provided by the applicant cannot be considered, and having the applicant merely throw money at council does not change the circumstance. A change in circumstance is something that the applicant or council cannot control. It is an external event or events that leads to an impact, either negative or positive. I would like council to consider what precedent could be set tonight, one that will allow applicants to change information after public hearing and influence individual council members to achieve their end goals, or one that will show this applicant and all future applicants that there is due process and input required for any change in a temporary use permit application before council can consider it. I urge council tonight to uphold the district and Squamish's bylaw and move forward with either a new public hearing or deny the wood fiber LNG temporary use permit as originally done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your submission. And sorry, my notes get deteriorated from here. I had, who was next to speak? Are you nominating a spokesperson on your behalf? Okay. Go ahead.
Hello. First of all, I wasn't prepared. I didn't know that we were going to have this opportunity to actually speak. What the previous speaker was talking about is exactly what I was thinking about when Councillor, I don't know if we're allowed to say names, when Andrew stated that, you know, he might consider it if they increased the damage deposit. And I had thought at the time that something like that shouldn't happen because the 2 million was proposed already. And then he just, I don't know, said 10 million would have been better. And then we're back here again. So that kind of threw me through the loop because I'm not familiar with your district governance policy process. I do know that I have concerns about the Flotel the size, the safety of the workers there, waste management. There's like a lot of things that we really need to be thinking about in terms of safety for everybody that's going to be involved in this process. And I'm extremely against any type of sorry, I'm a little lost for words. I'm against any oil and gas industry that is going to have detrimental effects. And being a Squamish Nation member, born and raised in this territory, we've had to deal with other industries that came in and didn't even bat an eye. And then it really irks me that the government and the industries are going to the First Nations communities and using reconciliation as a way of saying that this is okay when it's not. Because with Squamish Nation allowing something like this to happen, we're doing exactly what they did to us. When Britannia Mine Museum was here, when FMC plant was here, any industry that has been in the Squamish territory have affected us. And I don't want to see that. We need to protect Squamish. I care very much for my territory and all the people that live here. So I would like you to find another way to not approve this tonight and bring it back so there can be more investigations. And like I heard that $10 million is a drop in the bucket for somebody who is in this type of industry. So, you know, just keep that in mind when you come to this and decide that $10 million is going to be okay when it's not.
Thank you very much. And I know some of you attended public hearings, so this whole process is the same, where we don't applaud or celebrate or otherwise comments. So thank you for your submission and for everyone's restraint thus far. Sorry, our final speaker, I'm sorry, my notes on your name are terrible, so I'll let you reintroduce yourself, and you have what I'm calling 2 minutes-ish. So I will, at some point, I may need to step into timing, be about equal. Thank you.
Sounds good. My name is Miriam Adrangi. I am a resident from Brackendale. I want to echo actually a number of the things that the two speakers said earlier, especially with this added $10 million and the point that I brought up earlier, which was the increase in homicides that were faced in the town of Houston, which is a town of only about 3,000 people. And once the work camps came in, the year prior, there were no homicides in the town. The year the work camps came in and the drugs came in and the drug trafficking started, there were 6 homicides. And when the GITSEN members who were telling me this story conveyed this to me, I asked, well, did police investigate? Was there any follow-up? And the answer was that the police were involved. And so I think that we really need to take into consideration that yes, this is a flotel, it's on the water, but I think it would be delusional to think that it is actually going to exist in isolation. Many people may work in Squamish, come back and forth, or they might be going up the sea to sky, whatever it is. The reality is you can't isolate the flotel from our town. And we don't want to wait to see those impacts. And $10 million isn't going to bring family members their families back, their loved ones back. That's not going to help. On top of that, that doesn't even just go along with LNG and the impacts of that and the birth defects and that have existed in communities that have been near flaring sites. That's like its own separate issue. Again, $10 million isn't going to bring back those health issues to community members. On top of that, I also want to talk about Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition. They have a rafting company that operates out of Gitxsan territory, and they noticed that the LNG projects were drilling under important salmon spawning grounds. And so they brought this to the government, the ministry that they thought was involved in this, and they shoved them to another ministry, to another department of the BC government. And what they ultimately found was that when they got them all together and said like, hey, you guys are giving us the runaround, please tell us why you guys are impacting these salmon spawning grounds with your drilling projects, especially when drilling in these areas would actually violate BC laws and BC legislation around species conservation and habitat, and these ministries had nothing to say to them. And so I think that's really important when we say that, was it just last week, there was this big gathering of over 100 people celebrating the herring coming back. And now what are we going to say? Okay, the BC government is going to make sure that these are protected, when we can see examples from northern BC where the BC government is breaking and violating their own laws and legislation when it comes to protecting fish habitat. And here we are celebrating it. And then in the impact of all of these cumulative impacts, how am I doing for time?
You're at 3.5 minutes.
I'm at 3.5 minutes. I have
gonna
so
give
much more to
you,
say, but I'll stop
like a
now.
5-second conclusion.
Okay.
and
In
then-
conclusion, yeah, I think there's just way more that needs to be assessed. And this $10 million really is a drop in the bucket to these LNG companies that are profiting way more than that. People in Squamish are not going to see those funds. And to just know how much cash they're sitting on, I think $10 million is kind of a slap in the face to us, honestly.
Okay, thank you very much for your submission, and everyone's restraint for that submission. Okay, so next on our agenda under 15.1 is business arising from the minutes, and I'm going to have a quick introduction for this topic that I know many folks in the room are familiar with, but I thought it was worth a recap for anyone that's just maybe tuning into this as either remotely or revisiting this video. So I'm going to assume that Councillor Greenlaw is going to return shortly. So at the May 21st. At the May 21st regular council meeting, a motion was introduced to reconsider council's April 30th decision to deny the TUP for the Flotel. The reconsideration motion was approved, but further debate and decision on the TUP was deferred to tonight's meeting so that the district could meet its statutory notice obligations under the Local Government Act. And these obligations require that a council must provide notice of its intent to make a decision on issuing a temporary use permit. Now that the notice requirements have been met, the original motion is back on the floor, the same as it had been initially introduced, and is open for debate, amendment, referral, approval, or defeat. So that's where we are. And I think we've heard since the public hearing, we've including tonight, we have heard some new submissions and received emails numbering in the hundreds as far as both from all angles, we'll say. So I think that so I feel at this point, the appropriate course of action is that this matter be referred back to staff, and council direct staff to work with the proponent to provide information to council on the following matters prior to bringing the temporary use permit to a future committee of the whole meeting. And one has already been discussed, which is the increase in the security deposit in section 1B. to $10 million. And item second on my list is I would like to, so item B would be a clearer understanding of the risk, if any, that Henrietta Lake Dam poses to the proposed location of the Flotel. And item C would be a clear understanding of how WLNG and Fortis can work together to provide a fulsome picture of the impacts on the community of their projects. So that's my motion, and if there's a seconder, I will speak to it further, and then this can be amended from there if there's additional items that that folks would like to add or remove from my list thus far. Are you seconding that, Councillor Penningham? Thank you. I think that I've heard both in correspondence and also in conversations and so on around the importance of consulting with the public. That is why we took the measure of having a public hearing. I do think that this matter, enough new submissions have been received, hundreds, to warrant an additional public hearing. And rather than going directly from here to that public hearing, I think this is an opportunity to have the matters that that I've outlined here, and that perhaps my colleagues will see fit to add to, addressed in a fulsome way. I don't think that these pieces are necessarily, I don't expect them to be onerous. I know that the security deposit piece isn't a huge obstacle to figure out how that is incorporated. I do think that the risk piece is really important to understand, and at this point, our policy hasn't triggered the need for a hazard assessment. It's triggered at building permit. This is one of the only things that's just skips building permit. So it skips the trigger, and the trigger to me was put at building permit so that it was unavoidable. So I want to make sure that we're not approving a residential use essentially, and we're not putting people in harm's way. So I think that's, and this is has been well documented. I know that the proponent has responsibilities to that dam, including very frequent inspections. So perhaps this is information that already exists but hasn't been shared publicly or with this body. I'd like to understand that better. And item C, I spoke to earlier around our ongoing challenges of broadly with the project and its two proponents. So I'd like to see some fulsome movement in that direction. So that's where I am, and I'll look to my colleagues for further comments and or amendments if needed. Councillor Pettingill.
So are you looking for discussion on possible friendly amendments, or how do we?
I think that with I started using the alphabet there. We're at A, B, and C. So if this can go all together, that's fine. And if any of those points are contentious in any way, we can sever them out and look at these areas of investigation independently. I do think that my thought process here, though, is that to provide as much guidance as possible to staff so that when this comes to us, we have a head start. If we didn't take this step of right here today with parsing out the sort of the top issues that we would like to see addressed fulsomely before we get to committee of the whole, the challenge is then that committee of the whole is a discovery mission on additional pieces. So this isn't, I want to make sure we're not limiting the conversation at that meeting, but that we're being transparent with the pieces that we would like to see addressed at that time. But of course, in any meeting, council can do as can chase whatever thought is deemed appropriate they deem appropriate at that time. But I'm trying to get us to a succinct space. So I think right now, perhaps my motion has 3 points. So if you'd like to add one or edit one, I suppose you could try it as a friendly amendment, and then we'll see where we get to on discussing them individually. So go ahead.
Okay, maybe I'll there's a couple additional ones I would like to test out. I don't know if you want to watch for head shakes or nods or how we proceed, but there's been a fair bit of discussion, including tonight, about compliance with conditions. And so I would like a better understanding of how we get proactive, willing, and clear compliance, and that we understand what the expectations of compliance with conditions are. And condition 13 around procurement was discussed tonight. There's condition 14 and the committee that meets quarterly about with Fortis about workforce housing, safety, community services, so on and so forth. There's condition 24, which we've spoken about many times in this chamber, which is.
So if you'd allow, perhaps the way to turn this into a motion or to add it to motion, which would be maybe an understanding of the current compliance.
Sure, that's great.
Of the project.
Yeah,
and I'd consider that a friendly and a motion and should be readily available. So, that's okay with me? Is that okay with this with the seconder, or do we want to try to, or do we need a vote on this? Go ahead.
It's probably cleaner just to vote on each amendment. Yeah.
Okay, so that's fine. So, Councillor Pettingill, you need to move an amendment to that effect, or I will move that amendment on your behalf because I got the wording. You're seconding that? Yes. Okay. So this would be to amend this motion, and maybe I'll have the minute taker just read back what felt like a very concise motion when I said it, but let's make sure we have it and we understand exactly what we're discussing.
An understanding of the current compliance with conditions of the project.
That's enough? Okay. I think this is a pretty basic piece and should be readily available and isn't a huge investigation. So I'm supportive of this. Seems fair and should be publicly available. Any comments on this particular item? No. Okay. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I will not be supporting this amendment, and I'm going to refer to the comments made by Mr. Norm Barr during our public hearing, and reciting his experience, 3 terms councillor. We always reminded ourselves for a number of projects what the purpose of a land use application was, and narrowed our focus to that. Mixing the purpose of the application with larger political views or extraneous issues outside of the use is a rabbit hole I strongly, to quote Mr. Barr, advise you to avoid. I'm concerned that is exactly what we're doing. We're bringing in non-land use issues in citing these other issues of compliance. I don't dispute their importance or relevance, but here we are speaking of a temporary use permit that is focused on a land use. So I'll be voting against this amendment. Thank you.
I thank you for that, Councillor. I think an important distinction here is that this land use that we're considering also relies on many layers of approvals from other orders of government for different pieces that actually and understanding where we stand on that for taking a step further into those regulations, I think is appropriate, and that's why I'm supporting this motion. Any other comments on the amendment before I call the question? Okay, so with that, I'll call the question on the amendment, just this piece. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor French, Anderson opposed, motion carries. So now the motion is amended, and this is the process we'll follow if any additional pieces would like to be added. Councillor Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, clarity on where workers are permitted to stay during their time off, and I can speak to why I'd like to add that, if seconded.
Councillor Greenlaw, are you seconding that? Okay.
Yeah, so my reading of the certificate is that there are no restrictions on where employees reside during their time off. And the whole premise or principle or justification for this flotel is that it keeps workers out of the community, and whether you think that's a good or a bad idea, that is the supposed benefit, and that it saves our housing stock. But as I read it, it doesn't stop them on their week off or 2 weeks off from being in the community taking up housing. And so if this isn't actually solving the problems it's meant to solve, because it only addresses it during their 2-week on stint, then I think that's important for us to know. And so hopefully this is very simple to clarify, and I would just appreciate that clarification.
Thank you. Other comments on this? I won't be supporting the motion. I think that the regulation that we're looking at here is about workforce, on shift, and where folks go on their time off is incredibly problematic, and I think is the type of regulatory sort. I don't know how we could regulate that so I'm not supportive of this direction, although I understand and do appreciate the intent, but I don't think it's appropriate to include in this process. So I won't be supporting. Any other comments on this? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I won't be supporting as well. My challenge is whether we should be regulating where somebody is when they're not working, not under an employment situation. It's not clear that we should be doing that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go around. I'll just go around and then I'll come back to you before I call the question, Councillor. Any other comments on this before I go back to Councillor Pettingill? Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I won't be supporting it either. I do think it's difficult to regulate what people do on their time off. I'm not sure how you would enforce that either.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? I'll go back to Councillor Pettingill and call the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, to clarify, I'm not saying that we should regulate this. What I'm saying is, again, the whole supposed benefit of this flotel is that workers aren't taking up any community housing and that they're staying out of the community. And if that's not what this flotel is achieving, then, then that really sheds a whole different context on the value proposition for this flotel. And so if it's not doing that, why are we entertaining it? Whether or not we should try and regulate that is a whole other question, and I'm not even going there. I just want to understand, is this proposing to do that or not? I don't have that understanding. It's been presented as if it is meant to keep people, all these workers, always out of the community, that none of them will take up housing stock. That's how it's been presented. If that's not actually what is being proposed, I want to just understand that, and then I'll make my own decision from there, not talking about what we should regulate. I just want to understand what is the proposal.
Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Can I ask for clarification? Can you restate your proposed amendment, please?
To have an understanding of where it is proposed that workers are able to stay when they're not on shift. And I'm not trying to suggest what the answer should be, but I'm just trying to say, with the certificate as it is, does this mean that workers can take up community housing and so on? And so we're not actually saving the housing stock because, and I just don't know. What should happen is a different thing. Just what does this permit is what I want to understand.
Okay. Thank you. With that additional clarity, any other comments? I'll call the question in favor. All right, and opposed. So Councillor Anderson, Hamilton, French, and Mayor Herford opposed. Motion fails. So we're back to the amended motion. Does anyone have any additional items or for this? I've got Councillor French, then Greenlaw.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I have a question for you around logistics and timing. I'm going to guess that you put some thought into what the potential timing could look like for a committee of the whole meeting and then potentially a subsequent public hearing. Can you share anything with us around timing for those two particular meetings?
I think, yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I think that this is a consideration as we look at what these items that we're considering adding to this list are. And I don't know how onerous those items are. I've made some assumptions there, so I can say that we'd work with staff to have the earliest possible. Nothing I've seen here feels like it's a major lift, but the next step from this is getting that getting staff to weigh in on that. I see Mr. Stoner looking to chime in now, but I think the steps are a committee of the whole where we have these questions discussed and seeing how fulsome those are addressed. Then the subsequent step. Those things can happen very quickly if we're not getting if it's not to the satisfactory of council at that time, then it might take longer. So very, very quickly, we need to post 2 weeks notice for like we did for this week's event for the public hearing. So there's some constraints there for sure, but I will go to Mr. Stoner first, or who wants to chime in on these.
Through the chair, I just want to clarify that the 2 weeks required notice, we wouldn't be able to even do that until after the committee of the whole meeting that staff reported back at.
Yeah. So there's absolutely there is absolutely a knock-on effect, but the sooner the first piece happens, and I'll work with staff to make sure that our agenda time isn't the obstacle to this occurring. And did you have something in addition?
Thank you. Just what the dam entails, that could be months or much less, depending on exactly what we're looking for from council.
Well, I think that this was an item that I added, so I'll speak to it. And for me, it's perhaps it's a topic that's been discussed. It's known. I think that it's likely information exists. I left that description intentionally open to allow for if there's other authorities that have regulated, or if there's other engineering reports that can shed some light on the situation, then so I would think that coming to council at this CAL with what was readily available in a short time frame, and then we'll see where that takes us. I expect that this is yeah, so that's why I wasn't being prescriptive with a formal risk assessment or anything, because I feel like the dam itself has been quite studied, so I'd imagine that there's some documents readily available. And this was something that did come up at public hearing. We asked the question to staff. We had a very short answer. So, perhaps the answer already exists in our inside of our institution, and we can just have a more fulsome discussion about it rather than what was available to us at public hearing. Do you have?
Yeah, if I could just speak to that. There is no hazard assessment that exists for the Flotel. So staff looked at it and determined that it was not required. And we have staff that are qualified in reviewing hazard assessments. So to bring back something more to council probably would require us asking the proponents to do investigations, which presumably will take time.
Okay. So, all right. Thank you for that context. We're going to keep going on this process, and then we'll end up with an overall question that we'll need to vote on. So, are there any other amendments? Councilor Greenlaw, did you have something? Yep,
yes, I do. I'm still very concerned about the lack of cumulative impact assessment for the pipeline and export facility together. So I would like to propose an amendment to the motion that would include some aspect of cumulative impacts on our communities of the pipeline and export facility combined, specifically the cumulative impacts on housing, gender and cultural safety, environmental impact, and the impact of movers and workers / traffic impact. And I will speak to it if seconded.
That was the type of thing I was looking for under my item C. Could you?
I got the first part of it.
No, sorry. Could you read back the third bullet point from motion just to make sure. I just want to make sure that it might cover it, or maybe we need to add an addition.
The third part of the motion that you moved was how WLNG and Fortis can work together on a fulsome look at the cumulative impacts on the community.
Does that, it casts a pretty wide net, that wording, but does that address your concerns? Those are the types of things that I was trying to get at with this, amongst other things.
Yeah, well, I guess that'll all be flushed out in the committee of the whole, like what specifically we're asking for. I just want to make sure that there is a conversation because this Flotel is being touted as a solution for these gender and cultural issues, but realistically, it's a housing solution for fewer than half of the workers. So the biggest concern is getting Fortis and wood fiber at the table to have these conversations together.
Okay,
So I suppose it does.
Yep, that's the test. Okay, thank you. So we don't need an amendment there. Any further discussion or amendments to this? We now have something that, okay, seeing none, I'm going to look to my colleagues. We have one motion here. We voted on the amendments. We can do this all together, or if anyone feels strongly, we can break the specific pieces out. Those are our options. I'm comfortable with the one piece because we've gone through a process to arrive here. So, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
I'm just asking for a point of clarity from Mr. Valenesca's response. Thanks very much. Through the chair, Mr. Valenescas, you said that staff concluded that a hazard assessment was not required. And I just want to understand, is that because they just determined it was outside the jurisdiction of a TUP, or was there some like preliminary assessment of the hazard to determine a hazard assessment wasn't required? I just wanted to understand where that opinion came from, jurisdiction or like actually looking at the hazard.
Through the mayor, we have David Rolson, who is our expert on staff when it comes to hazard assessment review. And so I'll pass it on to David to speak to it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. David Rolson, Senior Manager of Infrastructure Planning. Staff did review this issue and concluded that a hazard assessment was not required for the Flotel. Our official community plan includes flood hazard and risk policy, which is based on the Community Charter and Land Title Act. They require flood hazard assessments for land development applications as deemed necessary by the district. So the Flotel is not a land development application and does not require a building permit, subdivision, or rezoning, which would be the typical triggers for a hazard assessment. So none of those criteria apply to the Flotel. It would be very unusual for a flood hazard assessment to be completed for a floating structure, as hazard assessments are almost exclusively for land development applications. And further to this, staff did deem that it's just not a credible hazard requiring an assessment given the low probability nature of the potential hazard, as well as the location and the type of structure, and namely that it's a boat that is somewhat distant from the mouth of the creek that Henrietta Dam would outflow through if there were a failure. So based on all of those factors, it was just not considered to be a credible hazard for the Flotel. If this was a land-based application closer to the mouth of the creek, then it would be a different story. So it's taken into consideration numerous factors where staff didn't feel that a hazard assessment would be required.
Okay, thank you. I think that response is far more fulsome than we had at public hearing. I think I'm still comfortable with having this in here so we can get that, we can surface this piece formally in a report, and if it's to that effect, you know, and if that's all that we can, if that's what we can get, and then I think that's fine. But I want to get those questions answered in a formal way. So again, not a huge time delay to have that for us. Back to that question. So we're in a position now where we can move these all together, which is my preference. I think we've debated them individually, and we've addressed the one piece that was the time we had the largest piece of time variance. So unless someone feels that they'd like to sever any one of these pieces out to vote on it individually, I'll call the question. Oh, you have one more additional? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'd just like to hear the point A read back. There's a specific thing I'm looking for in the security deposit language.
Can I just request that we read back the entire amended motion for clarity?
Sure. Is it possible to get it on this? Or is that too far? Well, I think we'll go with the read back. Is what I'm hearing. Okay.
My challenges with technology might make that worse. The motion as I have it is that the TUP number 76 be referred back to staff and that staff be directed to work with the proponent to identify an increase to the security deposit in section 1B to $10 million. The risk, if any, that Henrietta Dam poses to the Flotel, how WLNG and Fortis can work together on identifying the cumulative impacts resulting from their projects, and an understanding of current compliance with the project conditions.
Does that fit everyone's? Yep. Okay. Okay. Last comment, and then we'll call the question on this amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions about the timing were the timing is important, and I in supporting the direction that we appear to be going here. I'm hearing loud and clear from Mr. Rolston, not a credible hazard. Despite those words from our expert, I'm comfortable with asking the proponent to do some work and bring to us some information on the potential hazard that is connected to the positioning of the Flotel, the creek that it's near, and the dam upstream. Again, I heard loud and clear from Mr. Rolston, and I think it's fair for us to ask the proponent to back up the statement from our own District of Squamish employee expert on this matter. I'm also supportive of taking this to a public hearing because I believe that that is the quote unquote cleanest way for us to move this forward. I agree, new information has been introduced, and the best way to deal with that new information is to have another public hearing. And Mayor, I'm going on faith that you and the acting mayor for the month of June, Councillor Pettingill, in your discussions around the upcoming agendas for the rest of this month will take into consideration the importance of moving this forward as quickly as our calendar will allow. So Mayor Herford, I will be speaking in favor of the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Any other final comments before I call the question? Councillor Anderson, then Pettingill.
Mayor Herford, I will not be supporting the motion. That is with reluctance. I believe that in the two latter conditions, the holistic impact assessment from the community on both these projects and current compliance, this is straying too far into extraneous issues, extraneous to the purpose of the TUP application. And again, I'll cite Mr. Norm Barr. If you take your politics too far in front of the purpose of this application, you very much risk chaos in the aftermath. In my view, we've received in numerous testimonials, we have received numerous testimonials of present and ongoing and predicted chaos. So I'm quite concerned. I'm also, I'm not unhappy about going to a committee of the whole. I will probably be skeptical that I'll be convinced that another public hearing is necessary. I have received additional information and opinions since the last May public hearing. However, as regards new information in the context of that public hearing, I have not received additional information that addressed a topic or issue that was not discussed in some capacity in the written materials or oral submissions we received on that date. Nothing raised for the first time after the public hearing was closed. So I will unlikely to be supporting that public hearing. I am convinced that we are really risking further chaos by not focusing on the application and its purpose and focusing on its processing in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Penningill.
Yeah, thanks. I will be supporting the motion. I want to clarify a few things, though. I am at this point not supportive of the $10 million, but I understand we are going to committee of the whole to understand and discuss some of these things. And so for that reason, I'm fine to have that in the resolution, support the resolution. I think, I wanted to highlight one thing really interesting for me. We got a number of emails from current workers on the Port Mellon site, which, by the way, doesn't seem to be permitted in the current certificate. And the tone of most of those letters were, our worker conditions aren't very good. Please approve this Flotel so we can have better living conditions. And what I take from that is this proponent is willing to just push ahead before they have adequate housing and so on for their workers, which to me does not give me comfort on approving something that will have very little authority over. And so that's something I hope we can work through at the committee of the whole. I would like to clarify, in addition to the Local Government Act, which seems to imply no new information after a public hearing, our bylaw actually says no subsequent submissions. So the standard isn't even new info, it's just a subsequent submission. We've had many, many subsequent submissions. So I believe, regardless of the Local Government Act, our own bylaw requires us to have another public hearing, and it sounds like that's the plan before we make a final decision, so I'm happy with that. There are a few additional topics I would like to cover at the committee of the whole, and we can bring them up. And I think I would not like to be here in another year. So I want to make sure that before we end up, if we approve something, that we're clear, we're not coming back for more, that this really truly is everything that's needed, and we're proceeding on that perspective. I would like information on the efficacy of a Flotel in reducing prostitution, sexual exploitation, drug addiction, and so on, relative to living in community, relative to a land camp. I haven't heard anything about relative efficacy research that speak to any of these things. And so for me, that would be valuable. And one way or another, I would like to understand where workers are going to be on their time off. I understand council is not mandating that, but for me to get to support, that's probably going to be a key piece. And I would not want the proponent to feel limited by what they hear tonight. There's obviously a great deal of concern and discomfort in the community. And there's a great opportunity for the proponent to actually engage with the community and actually address the many, many, many concerns that still exist. So here's a great opportunity. Please take it. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I just also wanted to comment, I'm happy to see us go in this direction where we are asking for more accountability from the proponent. It has been a difficult relationship but it is absolutely essential that we have cumulative impacts of the two projects. And to be clear, there is supposed to be a housing impact committee formed as a condition of one of the issued permits already. And the proponent has stated quite loudly and clearly and proudly, in collaboration with the Squamish Nation, that the gender and cultural safety of our community members is of the utmost important. And they have already completed their portion of this work. So it shouldn't be a hard sell to get Fortis on board with continuing this important work and having them come to the table together to discuss it. The Fortis work camp is currently intended to be next to our university campus, and we deserve to know what the impacts will be on our community and on our housing in consideration of this TUP. Because again, it's being touted as a solution for all this housing the housing impacts and gender and cultural safety impacts on our community. But in reality, once again, this is just for fewer than half of the workers who will be coming to our community. So I'm happy to see some of those pieces coming up for conversation in the committee of the whole. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Anderson opposes. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. The next matter we have is an item referred from the special business meeting of May 21st. This is a 2024 UBCM draft resolution, and it's titled Fighting for Period Poverty. And I will, Councillor Greenlaw. Actually, what we'll do is let's take a 5-minute recess as we'll give folks a chance that don't want to stick around for the conclusion, a chance to relocate. And and maybe a chance for folks to join us from outside. That there's seats in here now. So we'll take 5 minutes, and when we come back, we will go to Councillor Greenlaw. We'll introduce the topic of this UBCM draft resolution. So 5-minute recess. Okay, welcome back to the regular business meeting, District of Squamish. We are now on to item, what number is this? Item 15.2, which is a UBCM draft resolution, fighting period poverty. I will turn it over to Councillor Greenlaw, who's been spearheading this initiative, to speak to it. Go ahead.
Thanks. Through the chair, for those of you who don't know, as I didn't, period poverty is the widespread lack of access to menstrual products due to financial limitations. And period poverty impacts girls, women, trans, and non-binary individuals in our community and leads to challenges in education, work, and overall social participation. According to a recent Leger survey, 1 in 4 Canadian women who menstruate have been forced to make the decision between purchasing menstrual products and purchasing other essentials such as food or rent in the last year. That is 1 in 4 Canadian women. People experiencing period poverty can experience social isolation, lost wages, decrease in mental wellness, and decreased access to educational opportunities and community activities. Period poverty is a symptom of poverty affecting marginalized groups at a disproportionately high rate, resulting in increased impacts on single mothers, transgendered and non-binary individuals, Indigenous communities, people of color, people in rural and remote communities, and those with disabilities. The Period Promise Municipal Toolkit is being developed by menstrual equity advocates in partnership with community partners and the United Way BC as a practical guide for municipalities to actively contribute to menstrual equity within their communities. Currently, there is a resourcing gap to continue the refinement and launch of the Period Promise Municipal Toolkit. UBCM is uniquely situated as a partner to support the co-development and rollout of the Period Promise Municipal Toolkit and support its member municipalities to address poverty in their respective constituencies. And with that, I will just read through the motion, and I will speak to it if seconded. Whereas almost 1/4 of Canadian menstruators say they have struggled to afford menstrual products for themselves or their children, period poverty, and that people who are menstruating but do not have menstrual products available to them experience social isolation, financial instability, and increased mental health concerns by not being able to attend work, school, or community activities without experiencing stigma and shame. Whereas municipalities play a pivotal role in addressing period poverty within their communities and may need support implementing practical solutions to provide free menstrual products to community members, therefore be it resolved that UBCM executives work with menstrual equity advocates and community partners to develop and distribute a Period Promise Municipal Toolkit that will help provide municipalities with the tools necessary to make menstrual products freely available in their washrooms and beyond.
I'll second that. Would you like to speak to it further, Councillor?
Yeah, I have a couple more things to say. I have been relatively outspoken about my opinion that gender equity is literally the most pressing issue in our world, as the majority of our global issues have at least an element of misogyny in them. And this is an element that addresses this motion is something that addresses women's health and is a critical piece of how women experience society differently from men. I've always considered myself a feminist, and I am always shocked when I realize how deeply ingrained I still am in systemic misogyny, which brings me to the story of how this motion came here today. Early on in my term, I was approached about advocating on the impacts of period poverty, and you know what? A self-professed, outspoken feminist who is largely shameless, might I add, I was surprised to find myself to be too embarrassed to bring such an intimate issue to my council colleagues. I was falling victim to the very shame and stigma that this motion aims to address. And it took 2 men, Councillor Phelps-Bondurant from Saanich, who spearheaded this motion, solidarity, brother, and Councillor French, who brought it to my attention to give me the courage to bring it forward to you today. So I wanted to give a shout out to those 2 men facilitating this motion and standing up for the women in their community, and also a thank you to the amazing new mom, Councillor Stoner, who helped with some of the language. This was very much a group effort to bring this to you today, and I really hope that my colleagues are supportive of this motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor French, yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. As noted by my colleague, the heavy lifting on the resolution was done by Saanich Councillor Teal Phelps-Bondurant. And I'm thankful that Councillor Greenlaw has opted to pick up that good work that was done. And I had no idea about your hesitation months ago when this could have been presented at our Lower Mainland Local Government Association annual meeting, which was held in Whistler. Ideally, that would have been the place for us to get this motion going. That didn't happen. And the fact that it is, I think, going to be supported in the next couple minutes here to get it to UBCM is a happy ending for me. So yeah, for everybody that was involved to get us to this point, including Councillor Stoner. Again, I had no idea she was involved in wording. Let's do this.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, happy to support this and very thankful my colleague or colleagues, it sounds like, have brought this forward together. I do want to highlight that in 2021, this body, so last term, approved the funding of the installation of machines for menstrual products in all washrooms, municipal washrooms, and that beyond that, the janitorial services budget would cover the restocking of them. But I think, you know, I speak for myself, I had a real blind spot and didn't think about, well, what about everyone else? And what's our power with our experience and our willingness to tackle this issue to actually spread this and push it and advocate beyond just here. I sort of got it done and moved on. And there's clearly some important and valuable work to do. And thankful that my colleagues have brought this forward and that it can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Speaking in support of the motion, I think I'll back up for a second. For those that aren't familiar with the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, UBCM, is where municipalities can advocate for policy change to the province. So that's where this goes. And I'm really proud to work with everyone around this table that supports initiatives such as this. This has come to us because it wasn't supported elsewhere. And this is a path to pull it, to advance this important issue. And I think we can all be proud here in Squamish that Squamish is a place where important issues can be moved forward through council. So thank you to everybody involved in this, and to our colleague that faced resistance at their council table, and I'm happy to play a part in advancing this. I look forward to this being discussed on the floor at UBCM coming fall. So thank you to everybody, and with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously, as it should. And we'll take applause on that one. That's fine. Thank you. So thank you for that. We have no committee minutes or reports. We don't have any council or staff in camera announcements. We've already dealt with the unscheduled public attendance. This is open question period. So this is for clarification related to any agenda items. So approach the podium and go ahead with your question.
My name is Jerry Lojacco. I live in Valley Cliff. I have a comment and a couple of questions. My comment is to Councillor Pettingill. You should know that the workers who will be living and residing on the Flotel while working at Woodfibre are being ferried from Vancouver to Squamish or directly to the Flotel. At the end of their 2 weeks, they're being ferried back to Vancouver. Highly unlikely that they're going to be rampaging Squamish, just so that you know. My first question is to Mayor Hereford regarding the agenda and his motion, which he did not put forward, to ask council to authorize a temporary use permit for a 1-year period, etc. Why did you change your mind on that when certainly by the time this was printed, you had received all and any new information? In fact, I highly doubt you received anything that could be considered as new information.
Okay, I'll get you an answer to that. And I think the answer lays with our corporate officer around procedure for reconsideration and why and how the agenda, how the item appeared on the agenda. So I'll go to our staff for that.
Why why you changed your motion from approving it to denying it?
The answer exist here with our corporate officer. So I'm going to allow the corporate officer to address the question because that's where the answer lies.
I can speak to the procedural and process piece of it. The motion has to appear on the agenda exactly as it was prior to council taking a vote on the 30th, on April 30th. So the motion on the agenda is the motion that is being brought back for reconsideration. And then at that point, council can amend it, refer it, defeat it, or approve it.
And the original motion or the recommendation, that was Mayor Herford's motion, but the recommendation on the 30th by the planners was that the TUP be passed. And this motion came about after the kerfuffle over the vote when you voted it down.
That was the motion that council defeated. That's on the agenda right now. That is the motion.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, my mic wasn't on.
So again, but you didn't re-vote on this motion.
No, the motion has to come back on the floor exactly as it was before they
Yes.
took the vote on that motion. But it doesn't mean they have to vote exactly on that motion again. It can be amended, referred, deferred.
Okay, so it was deferred.
Referred. It was referred to staff.
My second question is, will the taxpayers and voters of Squamish be able to learn what legal advice the mayor and council have been given? The planners recommended the approval of the temporary use permit. It has very specific requirements, which I believe the proponent meant, the applicant met, and that's why the planners approved it. Now, when Mayor Heintzman and councillors Elliott, Kent, and Pryor defeated the permit application by Fortis to drill 3 boreholes in the dike some 10 or 12 years ago. At that meeting, the council had the mayor present, had the their lawyer present, the district lawyer present. He gave council advice that we all heard. That lawyer was present. And the staff had recommended that that permit be passed. It was denied. Within days, a notice of civil claim was filed, and that was settled out of court. But the community of Squamish at that time heard the legal advice that was given to the mayor and council. Will you be transparent enough to allow us to hear the legal advice that you've been given? I'm guessing before April 23rd, before the 30th, before the last meeting where Councillor Hamilton moved to bring it back to the floor, and probably before today. Will we have access to the legal advice that you've been given by the district lawyer, as we have had in the past?
I will defer to staff as to what policy around that. I will, and we'll see where we go from there. But I think that there's the processes are quite different from I believe the boreholes were a development permit, which is very much, if it meets this criteria, then the permit should be issued. A temporary use permit, although the staff recommendation is based on existing policy of the district. Ultimately, it's at the discretion of council. So council has discretion with a temporary use permit versus a development permit. So there's a distinct difference, and I think that development permit and that friction there, earlier today we had a rezoning application and a development permit. The development permit, in my comments, it met all the requirements, so I see no reason to deny it moving forward. So that's a different scenario than a temporary use permit or a rezone or some other piece. So they're a little different as far as the situation, which is why you're likely saw that, but I will and I'll go to, that was just quick context, and then I'll go to staff member who on the generally where legal advice or when or how that would be surfaced if appropriate.
So there are certain circumstances in which council can hold closed meetings, and one of those includes the receipt of legal advice under Section 90 of the Community Charter and the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So those legal advice is typically in all municipalities received in camera and not released to the public under solicitor-client privilege.
Wait.
You could put it in an FOI request, but typically legal advice is redacted.
Okay, and to what Mayor Herford's comment that there is a difference, the discretion, I believe the discretion you have in denying this building permit as opposed to the construction permit? No.
It was a development permit in that
Development
other
permit.
case, and this is a temporary use
And this
permit.
is
So
temporary use
different
permit, which is
process.
similar to the building permit. You may have discretion, but I don't believe your discretion allows you to rely on extraneous points that have nothing to do with the permit. Nothing to do with the permit, nothing to do with the Flotel. That's why I would like to know what the legal advice is.
So this is for clarification of related to agenda items, not an opportunity to debate with myself or with council. So and I'm happy to provide the clarity where it
Okay,
exists.
you actually started the engagement. I was just reading my points, and you did interject. And I'm just saying that your discretion, I don't believe, allows you to pick inconsequential matters or issues as an excuse to deny the temporary use permit. The matters have to actually pertain to the Flotel. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other clarification for any agenda items? Okay, so next we have council or staff announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to follow up. I believe this will be the last time I talk about Hike for Hospice, the fundraising campaign, which I've talked about a couple of times in the last few weeks. The campaign will end on June 16th, and I want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. And when I last checked the fundraising tally, it was at a few $100 over $30,000. On the way to a goal of $75,000. And you can learn more about the valuable hospice programs that are offered in our region, in our corridor, and make a donation if you wish by visiting seatoskyhospice.ca. Oh, I think that is Sea to Sky Hospice Society.ca. If you do a search on those words, the #1 result will be the website. And I also wanted to share that Discover Aviation Day is being held at Don Patrick Field, Squamish Airport on Saturday, June 15th from 10 to 3. Full details at squamishflyingclub.com. I'm very confident about that web address. Helicopters and planes will be on display. Always a hit with the young kids. The Lions Club will be serving food, and pilots will be on hand to answer all of your aviation questions.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Any other? Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple things that have happened over the past few weeks. I had the honor to attend the ceremonial opening of the Oceanfront Park, and it was really beautiful. It was really touching to see the Squamish Nation really feel at home in that space, and the amount of artwork and legend that they've woven into that space. They've done a really good job of making a beautiful public asset for our community. I also had the joy of attending the SDC Purple Show, Squamish Dance Center, all our young performers, and it was really well put on, as all their productions are, and just so fun to see all the kids on stage strutting their stuff. And then also just to promote my office hours at the yarn shop on Thursdays from 12 to 2, if anybody wants to stop by and talk about community issues or anything they want to talk about, I'm there. And if you do walk in, I will drag you into conversations about social justice. So enjoy that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. There was a lot going on. The Squamish Feather Park opening was quite incredible. It was a long couple days, but yeah, just fantastic all around. And seeing, I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, how packed the park was and how excited people were to be there. It was really incredible. So thank you to everyone that made that happen. I know it's been a long slog for a heck of a lot of people. And I know, people are really excited to be there. I also wanted to, and I haven't heard what the results were, but a couple of weeks ago, the Squamish Community Music Festival was held. The numbers of participants more than doubled to over 300 kids this year. And so that was a fantastic success. But 5 kids were awarded the ability to go to Fort St. John. So they've been in Fort St. John over the weekend. I haven't heard how they've done, but Squamish has had some incredible musical representation, and I'm eager to hear how they all did.
Oh, do you have an additional one? Go ahead.
Happy Pride.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything on this side? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Hamilton.
Thanks very much. On the 22nd of May, I had the pleasure of attending the awards ceremony at House Sound Secondary, the scholarship presentations, and had the honor of delivering the District of Squamish scholarship, which was a pleasure, but an absolute honor to see all of the students at House Sound Secondary receiving, I think it was over $100,000 in total of scholarship funding from our community. So.
Hey, thank you. Well, yeah.
One more. I think my colleague, Councillor French, has had a long time involvement, but the triathlon, I think, was it 2 weeks ago? And I was not brave enough to participate, but my sister did. She was in pain for several days afterwards. I think it was a good kind of pain, but by all accounts, it was a huge success. So thanks to all that made that happen.
It's called type 2 fun, where it's not necessarily fun while it's happening or while you're recovering, but in hindsight, man, that was fun. Okay, it's been a really busy time, and since our last regular meeting where we do these updates, so starting it maybe on the 22nd, 23rd of May, we the SLRD, so Squamish Lillooet Regional District, generally so it's Councillor Pettingill, myself, Councillor Stoner, and now Councillor French picking up the reins of seats on that local government. And generally that body meets in Pemberton and but governs a very large area from Furry Creek to Gun Lake and out past Lillooet. It's quite remarkable. And so occasionally they take the show on the road and meet in in some of the areas to help give everyone context for the folks that don't reside in the area. So in November, I believe it was, we were in Lillooet and area A out towards Gun Lake to see where the fires were, which was quite a impactful trip. And this and on the 22nd, we actually met as a group in Furry Creek. So we had held our board meeting at the Furry Creek Golf and Country Club, and then also had the next day was really focused on touring around electoral area D, which is from essentially I guess Lions Bay up through to Upper Squamish and all the way to Whistler, anything that's not inside the municipality. So it was great to spend some time with the board and learn more about what was happening in Area D, spend some time at the beach. Yeah, I'm getting to that part too, but thank you for, it was great I always enjoy showing off our region, and it was really great to host the folks from all points of SLRD. That week, it was quite a busy week. We covered a lot of ground. And on Friday the 24th, there was a regional gathering, Naquant, I believe it's Naquant Y. I believe the gathering was called at the former site of the Coast Mountain Outdoor School, just north of Pemberton and Lillooet Nation territory. And this role as mayor here in the District of Squamish, we have worked and continue to work with Squamish Nation on all wide matter of issues, but with the regional district covering such a wide area and covering 13 First Nations, it's really challenging to build those relationships. So I was really honored to be a part of the gathering there with the Lil'wat Nation to celebrate the return of this facility to them and to learn more about their challenges they're having and their hopes and aspirations in their territory. So that was a really impactful day, and I hadn't been there since I went there as an outdoor school as a small child, and it was really great to be back there in such a good way. And then on the 25th, I was a couple of others have spoken about the opening of Squamish Feather Park. I was named as a witness in the witnessing ceremony, and the job of the witness is to witness and then carry that story forward. So what I saw there as witness of this ceremony was the large number of people of the Squamish Nation that were involved in executing what we see there at Squamish Feather Park. So everything from the art inside the buildings to the installations throughout the park, the design of the play structure, which immediately had children all over it and was really the backdrop, actually. As I sat to witness, we had all the folks involved standing blanketed in across the front of the room, and on the glass on the other side was just swarms of kids playing on what they worked so hard to create. So it was really something special. But seeing so many of the folks that were involved were youth, and seeing their Squamish Nation stories, their legends themselves represented in a park in a meaningful way and playing a role in that. I think the pride was well deserved and very, very evident. So it was amazing to be part of that. And I spent the rest of the afternoon just wandering around talking to happy people in the park, despite the fact it had maybe a 60 or 70 kilometer-hour wind going that day. But despite that, everyone was still really happy. So I'm looking forward to some sunny days down there, sunny mornings maybe before the wind comes up. And then as we move on, we had a council team building exercise. So as some of you witnessed in the room tonight, we get to discuss very heavy matters. And for us to best do that, we need to understand each other and respect each other. So team building is an important part of that, so we can disagree well. And what you see in front of Councillor French is the prize. And Councillor French, can I put you on the spot and have you read the title of said prize?
Yeah, for sure. Mayor's Award of Distinction of Excellence in Trivial Matters.
So Councillor French proved shockingly quite proficient in the trivial matter of bowling. So congratulations, Councillor French. We'll find another trivial matter to see if we can wrestle that away from you. And then on the 31st, we had the honor of presiding over the Pride flag raising event that happened, I guess, right above us and across the street. Over the last few years, that event has grown in popularity. I don't know if that's because there was cake last time. We had so many people out this time. But all joking aside, it was really great to see so many members of the community come out. And you can see around the chambers here, we've gotten into the spirit inside as well. And I'm particularly proud of this flag that's behind me. It's just beautiful, and I think is too pretty to put on top of the building. So I'm happy to display it here for Pride Month. And I also was reflecting that when folks see these flags, and I hope they feel seen and loved. But I know that when I see one of these flags, I I know that I'm in a safer place than I was, and I think it's a universal feeling for everybody. So I'm quite happy to be somewhere where this is something that we can bring to the forefront. And what else? Did I do anything? I think that brings me to the end of my notes, but I'm sure I could tell more stories if anyone was interested, but I'll leave my update there, and my congratulations again to Councillor French. And yeah, who knew you were that good at bowling? Okay. And with that, we do not need to close this meeting. So now we're looking for termination. And I did look this way first. So Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? A unanimous decision to end the meeting. Love it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.